Visuals doesn't matter. What makes things like variation?
Right, but it can measure that.
Absolutely. We are looking for migratory birds.
Is this part being recorded?
Migratory birds.
Is this part being recorded?
The exact opposite.
It is?
So we were looking at
Don't know this. I don't know. Hanging out. Yeah.
We're just trying to.
Conversation.
No, it's just.
Do you mind? I don't want to set the timer on my phone, but like put a timer for like so that we have 20 minutes left without questions. So how do you want me to set it? 5:10. Just like take my okay, I'll try to get it. I'll try to monitor, but if I'm not going to, yeah, it'll be 5:10. Okay, I'll try to get your attention. Hey y'all. You guys ready? Is everyone else ready? Hey Peter, can you ask if or see if anyone's out there? And tell them that we're starting. Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm an open mouth breather. Sorry. Okay, so first off, I'm Jordan. I'm so happy that all of y'all are here and all of y'all are here. You guys have traveled many lengths to be here. And on behalf of all of the EIS Planning Committee, we're very grateful. Today was awesome. So thank you. I'm gonna first introduce myself, and then I would like y'all to kind of follow suit. I know that we all did very formal introductions, at least y'all did. And so with those formal introductions, I just wanna sweep the floor with it again. But I really wanna use this hour-ish that we have to get to know y'all a little more personally. Because I know, at least in my perspective and experience, scientists are not, they're separated from the public and not necessarily in the like celebrity rock star way that I think they should be. But they're definitely like, you know, it's really hard to convey to the public, even your own friends and family, that you're just a friendly neighborhood scientist and you're still a person, especially from the student aspect, you know, like you're trying to be you guys. So that's my kind of goal for today. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Jordan. I'm a third year EEB or Ecology and Evolutionary Biology program student. My home department is VIBS, which is in the College of Veterinary Medicine, but don't identify traditionally with any of that. I identify as a parasite ecologist and a parasite ecologist rather than a disease ecologist because I don't really care about health of hosts. Sorry. So I, as a third year PhD student, I'm in like treading water, like many of y'all and you all did at one point. And so a little bit more about my background is I took 6 whole years to do my bachelor's. It was a long time and then I got obsessed. So I stuck around and did my master's. And then I didn't want to hop off the train and I made my boss now take me on as a student. So that's me. Would you like to start, Dr. Blumstead? Yeah.
I identify as a behavioral ecologist and conservation scientist. I scare things. I was an undergrad at SKI-U Boulder. I did my master's and PhD at University of California, Davis, which has a great animal behavior program. And I've always been fascinated by animals and behavior, but also equally fascinated by and concerned about, you know, our growing crisis in, you know, biodiversity, on which not only makes us happy and healthy, but, you know, we really depend. And, you know, how to bring those together. I'm most inspired these days by thinking about how to fuse fields. So conservation behavior is an example. Evolutionary medicine is something that's been going on since the 90s and is really beginning to finally take off and grow You know, I've always used evolutionary medicine as an example of something that makes perfect sense. How come it's taken so long to get going? And I think from sort of a sociological perspective, I'm really interested in bringing together people and ideas and working to sort of come up with novel things. So at some level, diversity of ideas, diversity of people is really important for a lot of things that I do.
I'm Rick Carbon. I am in an entomology department, which seemed shocking to me. I had very little background. I had no formal training in entomology, but I was kind of accumulating rejection letters, and it seemed like, oh, why not get one more? And somehow or another, I wound up getting hired at UC Davis, where I've been ever since. I am the first person in my family to go to college, and I went to a very small college where I had very little exposure to research. Went to graduate school in ecology because I kind of thought it was environmental studies. And that was a terrible experience for me. I really didn't like it at all. My major professor was not at all supportive and told me I wasn't going to get a job. And so I feel as if one of the things that I'm really passionate about is sort of trying to level the playing field for graduate students who come from diverse backgrounds and just sort of, I feel like there are a lot of kind of insider tricks about being a grad student that I had no idea about. And I'm really quite interested in trying to level the playing field for graduate students and in mentoring graduate students.
What do I want to tell you? Let's start at the very beginning. So I was a free-range child. At a very young age, I sort of knew what I wanted to do. It was natural history at a very young, like 6 years old, and there happened to be a nature center nearby. And I just slum around the nature center all the time. Anything I could do to touch an animal, to be near a naturalist, whatever it happened to be. So to this day, I'm a big supporter of nature centers in communities. I think it's a huge deal, and especially in cities. But I never had planned on getting a PhD or doing research. I was just very inquisitive and happened to bump around and always got lucky having mentors that were really important to sort of continue to challenge me or continue to nurture me or whatever, take me birding or whatever it happened to be. So I went to a little school in Connecticut and with a guy there who was one of the top birders in the world, but he knew his mosses, he knew his salamanders. We worked really hard to sort of quantify various distributions of various things around the entire state of Connecticut where I grew up. Hung out with guys, scientists, in the American Museum of Natural History. And so from there, he said, Pete, you got to go to LSU and go to South America and study birds down there. So I went to a museum and started to get brainwashed by all the museum science that Corey was talking about and all the importance of museums and realizing how important museums were. But I also realized that unlike a lot of my students, colleague students there, when you pull open a drawer of specimens, it didn't do it for me. Like it would do it for my colleague. I totally get it, understand it, added thousands of specimens to these museums, but I much preferred watching individuals and watch individual live birds and moving around. And for them, that was it. And so I then went to work with Dick Holmes up at Dartmouth, where I really learned how to watch individuals over time, color-banded birds, and really started to appreciate those color-banded birds. And just started and ended up, next thing I knew, I had a PhD and had a job at the Smithsonian, where I then built this program around, as I said, fundamental ecology. But it also became clear to me that I had to start focusing on conservation questions because I was watching many, many species disappear before my very eyes. And because I had this fundamental question about what causes declines, why are populations limited, how do you pinpoint these causes of decline in a way that allows us to maximize how we can invoke measures to stop the declines like we've done with so many endangered species successfully. It's much more challenging now because the numbers of species are just fire hosing at us at this point. So now I find myself in a situation where I decided to leave the Smithsonian because I felt like I couldn't do what I wanted to do and needed to do at the Smithsonian. And so I've left the Smithsonian, I've left a lot of my research behind, and I'm taking on very specific things. At Georgetown, what I'm doing now is essentially building a school for the environment in Washington, D.C., next to a brand new school for policy, next to a very important law school within steps of the Capitol building. This is a really important thing. It's not just me, it's me and a bunch of people at Georgetown, but Georgetown has been behind the 8 ball in many respects. And this is their attempt to go way ahead of the 8 ball. And so I feel like this is a critically important thing to do for you. I'm pretty much done, right? I mean, I'm almost 60. My research career, I've done what I'm going to do for the most part. That's what statistics tells me. What I need to do is to make sure I can do as much as I possibly can for the next generation and their next generation. So I'm totally focused on that and bird conservation, from basically how do we reimagine bird conservation, because what we've been doing for the last 30 years, and in birds we've done a lot, but it's not working. Too many things are slipping through the cracks. So what we've done is to pull together many, many people we built something called the Road to Recovery, which is a reimagination of how we do bird conservation, not waiting until birds are endangered or threatened, which is when we really only do regulatory action or do anything. We need to do things way before that. So we're trying to build a mechanism to actually do those sorts of things way before they get to the endangered species piece. So that's all I'll say. So I can talk too long. Yeah.
Where do I start? I have to yet again follow Pete.
Oh.
So I think like him, I'll start at the beginning. So I grew up in Louisiana and I loved nature, but I grew up in cities. So my idea of nature was like the pigeons and the ants in the cracks of the sidewalk, but I was obsessed with PBS. I watched every show on PBS. Now, when I was growing up, there was no Animal Planet or Discovery Channel, or even MTV. That tells you how old I am. But I just like watched every nature show, and I thought like these scientists have the best lives in the world. They're like trekking through the tundra, or measuring things in the Arctic, or running around rainforest. And I thought like the world needs like 100 of those kind of scientists. They're all on PBS. So what am I going to do? I also grew up incredibly poor. I grew up well below the poverty line. I will tell you that when I was a PhD student, I was making more than my mom, and my mom was making more than she'd ever made in her life. So my perspective on sort of salaries, on privilege, were very different. I grew up in low income housing. So like, I didn't know anybody who went to college except my teachers. That was it. But I loved bugs. I thought they were the coolest thing ever. And I think part of what I loved about them was that I could go out in my urban environments and I could find cool things happening. I was attracted to ants because I could watch them doing stuff. It wasn't like the beautiful beetle I might find, and I might not find another one until the next year. I could literally put crumbs out on the sidewalk. I had my little notebook. I had notes. I thought I was like a scientist. It was so cute and adorable, I'm sure. I wish I still had those notebooks. It would be ridiculous. But I just thought that that's what it was. And so when it was time for me to start thinking about college, I had no direction. My mom, when I had to fill out my financial aid report, said, here's my taxes. I literally filled it out on my own. I applied to college. There was no college tours. Like my family didn't know any of this. And so I just was like, okay, well, I'll go take some classes at the college in New Orleans. And I realized like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that wasn't it. And I was a punk rocker, as you can probably tell, covered in tattoos. I was already having tattoos at that point. I was like, I want to move to California. Now, keep in mind, I've never had a parent who like went to college. I didn't know what I was doing. I moved to California and then was like, wait, there's something called out-of-state tuition. I can't afford that. And so I got a job, and I worked because of when I happened to move, I had to work for over a year so I could apply for in-state tuition. I was so poor, I couldn't afford the UC system. That's a public system. I had to go to the CSU system, and I had the best experience of my life. I went to San Francisco State and I just blossomed. And I had great teachers, but I knew I wanted to study entomology. And the day I arrived, I thought, okay, I'm studying entomology. I'm going to get a degree in biology. So what are my career options? I thought, okay, I can be a high school teacher, or maybe I can work for a pest extermination company. That was literally what I thought my choices were. And I am so fortunate that in my freshman year, the first half is sort of cell molecular, the second half is organismal evolution. My TA for my organismal evolution, like she was as crazy as I am about ants, about fungi. And so she saw something, and she immediately connected me with entomologists in my department. So I started doing research in my sophomore year. First semester of my sophomore year, I was embedded in a lab. And I would say it was maybe like the second month of doing research. I go in to work with my grad advisor, and he's like, today you're not working in the lab. The PI wants to see you. I am terrified. I thought I've messed everything up. You know, I'm intimidated. I go sit in his office and he's like, Corey, so I heard you're doing really well in the lab. So we need to know right now, like, what's your career trajectory? Do you think you want to teach? Do you think you want to go into industry, or do you think you want to go to grad school? Because we'll put you on projects that are going to help you get there. And I am like, I'm first gen. I'm sitting there. It's my sophomore year. And I'm like, I guess I'm going to go to grad school. So from that point on, it was sealed. I would at least do a master's. Only because as a Southerner, you say something out loud to people you respect, it's sealed. It's a done deal. You have to do it. And so that was just the start of my career. And it was amazing. I had such an awesome experience. I mean, I'll tell you, as being low income, coming from New Orleans, to go to Harvard, do you know how overwhelming that was? My first week of class, 2 major things happened. One of which we had our welcome mixer. And I like tried to dress my best, you know, I'm like, and of course, the rest of the biologists are like in their Tevas with socks and their cargo shorts and their conference t-shirt from like, you know, older than I was. And then there were the people serving us the appetizers in full on tuxedos outside on the grass. I just thought this is the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. Now it's like so normal to me, which is even weirder. The other thing is that, so I didn't know anybody and I'm trying to like, you know, get to know people, but my first week, somebody stole my lunch. So I just remember thinking like, wow, everybody has these ideas about Harvard and it's nothing like they imagine. Now, I ended up having a great experience there and I've now gone on and done a lot of things, but I think that like, what I want to share is that there's lots of ways to do science. There's people who are question driven. There's people that are organism driven, and there is no right way to do it. I am clearly organism driven. I want to know every single thing about ants, from their stable isotopic signatures to their chemistry, to their microbiomes, to their evolutionary history. And so I think there's many ways to do it. So don't ever let anyone tell you that you're doing science wrong. There's no right way to do it.
All of what they all said.
But with loud frogs.
Oh my goodness. After you guys, every one of you talked about things that I really relate to. So I guess a little bit of my background, as I was already introduced, but I grew up in Southern California, also in a city looking at Argentine ants and thinking that was wildlife. And then I went to UC Berkeley undergrad, but at a young age, I knew that I was really passionate about conservation. And that's really what was motivating my career choice, I think from the time I was 12 or so. After I went to Berkeley, okay, so I should talk about my undergrad because I think there I was interested in conservation and environmental science issues that I didn't really know what ecology was. And I had 2 experiences as an undergrad. It was a huge institution, so it's really hard to get hands-on research experience while I was there, but I did a summer at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum, and that really opened my eyes to lots of things, the importance of museums, and also I had a conversation with a man there who studied heliconia his whole career. And I remember I had a conversation with him and I said, I don't want to do that. I know that I need to do something bigger picture. And he said, you should go to the Yale School of the Environment. And I was like, oh, okay. That was kind of his advice as somebody that was really interested in conservation. And potentially I didn't think I was going to go into academia. I thought I might work for a nonprofit or something like that. And then the other experience I had was I did a quarter in Costa Rica on a tropical ecology program. And that was actually my first experience with ecology. I didn't even take an ecology class, I think, as an undergrad. I was more molecular and environmental science. And that really opened my eyes to like, oh, okay, I really like trouncing around in the jungle and this is fun. And so how do I combine these things? But then I went to Yale and I got a master's, which was really a professional degree. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I still kind of thought I might work for a nonprofit, but I really liked research and I wanted to continue doing that. So I continued on and got my PhD doing the tropical research I presented today on cookies in Puerto Rico. And that kind of just led my career down that road. But now, yeah, so I describe myself as a conservation ecologist because it's my passion. a lot of my research involves looking at the role of animals in biogeochemical cycles. And what I really love doing is bringing groups of people together to do research projects and working with others, and kind of pulling together people from different subdisciplines to work on the same questions. Yeah, so I don't know, that's it.
That was great, guys. Thank you. So now, as all extremely accomplished human beings, what change are you prioritizing to create in your field, in the community of science of like your field? And this is for anyone. You don't have to go like down one by one, but.
I'd say the thing I'm trying to change right now is sort of the demographics of scientists. I've been involved in a lot of programming, both at the Field Museum, at Cornell, and with my scientific societies to ensure that we're making opportunities for people who were not invited to the table, right? And we know that the most creative ideas come when you have diverse communities sitting at the table. It's also meant that I've had lots of learning to do along the way, both in my vocabulary, right? If you've spent time, with any DI initiatives, you know that there's a whole bunch of like terminology that is unique and new, but it's also learning how to have conversations across differences. You're not always going to agree. And so, recognizing too that to make change, it has to be systemic, but it also has to be at an individual level, and that we can't sort of expect the status quo to make the change. And what I mean by that is like, we have a policy, I have a policy now in my lab, and I have for a long time, that we don't take any volunteer interns ever. You must be paid to be there. I've worked with organizations to create paid internships where I've literally had people tell me, well, we could double the size if we made half of them unpaid, because so many people are dying to have this opportunity. But I'm like, the people who can afford to do the volunteering, they already have so many opportunities that they've experienced. We're trying to touch the people who may not have been able to ever come to the science table. And so I think that's the thing I'm most committed to. I'm happy to tell you all the ways I'm doing it, but I think that would be just making lists that are not beneficial. But part of that is also recognizing your privilege. I mean, although, we just all listed things that we overcame, I'm also white. I hold a lot of privilege for being white. I'm able-bodied, I'm cis, I'm heterosexual. Like with that already, like doors are just remain open for me, despite the fact that there's lots of things that close them for me as well. So recognizing your privilege is super important.
Yeah, I 100% agree with the white privilege thing, white male privilege especially. And so I consciously right now, it's all about pushing other people up into other positions, whether it's when I bring speakers to campus, it's all about other people doing the interviews and changing the face of what that looks like publicly and for science and conservation. But the thing I wanted to say, but I wanted to reiterate those important points. As I approach, these really explicit conservation challenges, the thing that I finally learned is that it's not just about natural science, it's about social science, and integrating at a very early stage, co-creating as we think about the solution space that we put on the table. It's got to be a co-created process that includes both natural and social science. Unfortunately, the world is a tricky place to live with humans, and it'd be such a wonderful place in some ways without humans. In other ways, no, I get it. But it has to be a co-creation process if we're going to solve so many of these problems. Otherwise, I've battled with the cat issue for years and years and years. And I really don't want to talk about that. It's such a problem issue. And I think there are some issues that it really gets challenging with, especially with cats. But I think for a lot of issues, if we don't have all the stakeholders at the table to understand each person's values or each group's values, and each person's perspectives, we're never going to really solve the problem. So I don't think there's an easy solution there, but I think we have to start off with that moving forward.
Yeah, I agree a lot. I think that I founded a new journal called Frontiers in Conservation Science, and our goal really is to sort of, encourage people who are doing very interdisciplinary research. I think one of the sections on human-wildlife interactions is like, really successful at doing that, but we want, policy, SES type, socio-ecological system type stuff, to be published there. And some is, and some really good stuff is. And I think that thinking about, I follow, as you may have noticed, I follow shinies. I'm excited about, I'm very unstrategic at some level, and it's like, well, this is cool. Let's do this, and let's increase the bandwidth more to do that. But I think the biggest thing is making a difference, and how do you make a difference? And I think as Pete said, acknowledging that humans have to be part of the solution is interesting. I will also say that I also I like that Rick earlier described himself as being a contrarian, because I think that we need to create a safe space for contrary ideas as well. So 30 by 30, which came from Ed's Half Earth, if you think 3 steps ahead, it sounds like a great thing, except simultaneously we may be trying to decolonize science as well. And now are we taking people off the land that was their historic land or whatever? And I think we need to talk about these things politely and come to solutions about this. And I will say that while I think co-creation, I'm involved in we call the conservation clinic project, where we're trying to create a massively integrated sort of tool and we've done all sorts of social science research about what the needs are in this space, but a tool to provide managers all over the world, really, ultimately, with tools to ask questions that will allow them to solve problems. A lot of demand for social science stuff, a lot of demand for how do I, survey my stakeholders, et cetera. But I forget where I was going with that one. But I think that building people into it is essential. But yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, y'all. Now I want to shift gears a little bit to securing the bag, getting the shmoney. How do you guys do it? And especially, so I feel like scientists aren't given enough credit of being creative and curious at the same time. And writing grants is a great opportunity to demonstrate that. Like, you have all of these questions all the time, and then you have to be very selective, though, in a business matter of which questions can you get paid for. And so I have a couple of questions layered into this. One, in your careers of writing grants, what are your do's and don'ts about writing grants? 2, what was your favorite project that never got funded? So you kind of had to drop it? Or did you never drop it and you made the world accept your question?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm very interested. You're pushing one of my buttons. I can't help myself. I feel as if this mania to write grants and get grants is really misguided and is really counterproductive to doing good science. And I recognize that maybe I'm in a position that's unusual. The science that I do, I can do for very little money. But I feel like I'm never writing another grant. I mean, I'm done with that for sure. And I have tried really hard not to get caught up in the grant writing bullshit. I think that having been on, NSF panels, the projects that get funded have to be projects that are sort of well conceived and certainly well presented, but not necessarily the best science. And if you are dependent on your peers to tell you, yeah, this is good stuff, that will make you so incredibly conservative. The only projects that can get funded are projects that everybody already believes in. And being on these panels, I don't know, this is a kind of arrogant thing to say, but I sort of look at these people and think, I don't really respect them as people necessarily. I don't want to grow up to be like them. And why would I let them, like what I work on is really important to me. Would I let this panel of people make another really important decision? Would I ask them, I'm thinking of going out with this particular person. What do you think? Do I have your approval to do it? It's not gonna happen. They don't get to make this really big decision for me. And I think I think it's really misguided and really bad for science to be so dependent on getting the approval of this, group of people to let you do the work. The work that I talked about, plan communication, but because my administrators don't think this way, I have submitted lots of grants to do plan communication work. Before that, to do work on induced resistance. And none of those grants have gotten funded. I have been, sort of fortunate, or I don't know what the word would be, lucky to have other work funded. So I've had a source of income coming in, but the stuff that I'm the most proud about, I have never gotten funded to do. And I don't think I could have done it if I was dependent on the stamp of approval of my peers. And I'm really disheartened to see academic communities, other communities increasingly swayed by the amount of money that is coming in. And I'm also really disheartened to see so many of my colleagues become research administrators. It's the part of the job that I certainly like the least, not why I became an ecologist. And the people who spend all of their time writing grants and writing progress reports and then hiring other people to do the work for them. I just think that I kind of feel sorry for them, and I think it's really bad for science. Ooh, okay, we'll stop there.
I'll be the contrarian. I don't agree with, I think it's a dire view to have. I mean, I do think that there's some amount of it. I don't like that administrators are now saying, you're a worthy faculty member and you're not based on your dollars. It should be the impact of your science. I do think that, I mean, so recently one of my graduate students has been struggling with whether finishing the PhD is the place for him. And, we've had many, many conversations. He's now come to the decision that he actually wants to stay and he loves what he does. But, there was a period, it's COVID, what do you expect? But I remember we got to almost like the end and he literally looked at me and said, I never asked you, why do you like your job? Like, it's from his viewpoint, I'm writing grants, I'm going to faculty meetings, I'm serving on panels. It's like none of the stuff that he thinks is the good part. And I told him, I was like, do you realize I get to sit and think about ants and think of the craziest stuff I want to test. And then I get to convince people to give me money to do it. Now, of course, there might be some sort of stifling of creativity happening. I like to think not. I will tell you, I've had many grants rejected. I've gotten some grants. I think the most cutting edge proposal I've ever written got funding, and I think I've done some of my best work out of that. I have some proposals that I think I was being safe with that never got funded. So I don't know if I'm going to go entirely along with you. I don't love that people are just chasing dollars now, and that, the way you often get evaluated is by your dollar mark. That's not what we as scientists should ever be evaluated with. And I will also add that although I'm not sure that I ever want to be an administrator, I understand people who like to make things happen at higher levels and for other people. So I'm not going to poo-poo my colleagues who consciously choose. It's one thing if you're like, well, I can't think of any creative ideas anymore. But if you're like, you know what, I like facilitating the science happening more than I've enjoyed being involved with it now, I want you to be my administrator. We need those people.
I agree with that about needing good administrators, and more power to the people who want to do those things that I don't want to do. I really appreciate that.
We all do.
Yeah, but I don't want to spend all of my time writing grants to hire other people to get to mess around with ants. I want to be the person, and I really,
We should talk.
Yeah, I see so many. I mean, ask yourself, does your major professor do the stuff? Or does it get farmed out to undergraduates who are not only getting to do the fun stuff, working with the organisms, but in doing so, gaining the intuition, like a number of people today. I think in your talk, you were talking about how you were doing this sort of repetitive, mundane task, and it came to you, whoa, there's a cool insight here. If you're sitting at your desk, spending all of your time facing dollars, you're not getting to work with the
Oh, agreed.
organisms.
Oh, agreed.
And I mean, ask yourself, does your major professor get to do the cool stuff? Or is your major professor, in front of a computer screen most of the time? And it's, the undergraduate technicians who are actually working with the organisms. And yeah, I think that for most people, that's the direction that it goes.
I run a long-term study that we've completed 60 years of studying yellow-bellied marmots.
We are older than we thought, Dan.
I'm not that old. Ken Armitage started it. He had 40 consecutive years of NSF funding, powered to him. But, it's an uphill battle. I have never gotten an animal behavior grant from NSF to study the marmots. My favorite rejection was I bring fields together, and part of that, I was part of a Darwinian homeland security field where we created, natural security insights from life and successful life to think about security and defense. Got to hang out with really interesting people. The leader of it, unfortunately, was killed in a bike accident. Rafe Sagrin. He wrote "Learning from the Octopus," which is a fabulous book, and really was sort of the inside story of what we did over many years, we and others. But during that time, I'm thinking about networks and terrorist networks, and I'm reading all this stuff, and I'm like talking to physicists and CIA type people. And at some point, I'm like, man, you can like think about these networks for animals, and this gives you new ways to think about animal society. And I was one of the leaders writing the first reviews, recognizing that social networks can be, important for non-humans. I wrote 2 NSF grants. I've gotten turned down so many times. I wrote 2 NSF grants, on this. The last one, I included preliminary data and everything. And I'm an enthusiast and I'm a skeptic. I think that's a really important combination. So it's like, this is going to be useful if, you can come up with new ways to ask questions that are interesting. This is going to be useful. And it's really hard, by the way. This is going to be useful, if there is some sort of heritability to it. This is going to be useful if there are associations with functional things, right? And that's how the grant was sort of set up. Got turned down for all that. The last time I got turned down, I had basically ad hominem attacks that should have been redacted. And then I did it anyway. When I was trying to get tenured, I'm writing proposals for a suite of communication things. And I was told, you're proposing too much. I don't think you can do this. So I did it anyway. I had set up funds. I just got 2 days ago turned down for an NIH grant with Elaine Schau, who is this incredible microbiome biologist, incredible. And, she is doing cutting edge stuff. She thinks about social behavior and notobiotic mice and autism, and has a ton of money, both from private. She starts companies. And the comments weren't bad on the proposal. We didn't even get ranked. The comments weren't bad on the proposal. One of the comments was, I can't imagine, Elaine's doing too much. I can't imagine how any of it's good.
Oh,
I mean, that was bullshit. It really was. And, we didn't get ranked. I have to talk to the program officer when he's free. But I don't know. I banged my head against the wall. And I'm out of money for the Marmot project, and we're desperately trying to get more. We're going to develop a notobiotic mouse system with marmots, and we know the natural social behavior. We're going to put those microbes in the mice and see if we can, modify their behavior. High risk, high reward. It was a pot of money for high risk, high reward stuff. But at the end of the day, at times you need money for stuff. I mean, you might not need a lot of money, but I was on a panel about long-term studies, And Tim Clinton Brock said, 6 months. It takes 6 months to write a proposal. And, you know, if it doesn't get funded, try something else. I never submit the same proposal twice. So I don't know. I'm very frustrated by money.
Yeah.
I'll,
Oh, go ahead.
I'll just add in. So I don't know if all of your universities have the same model, but my university, I can't take a graduate student if I don't have funding for them, and I have to personally bring it in. So there's no TA positions in our college. There's no other way for me to fund them. So if I just gave up on writing grants, then I would have no more students and just, you know, no more research except for what I could do myself. So I'm guessing that none of you are in that same situation. Are you in that situation?
Well, I was at the Smithsonian.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of a different thing where you can't really just give up on writing grants. But you know, everybody's approach I think is different. I think that grant writing is a creative, like one of the more creative parts of what we do. It's where you kind of get to propose ideas that you haven't tried maybe fully yet. And you get to think about what's really cutting edge and how you want to place that research in the broader research out there and why it's unique and why it needs to be done. And so a lot of people excel in that area and they love writing grants. They would rather write grants than write papers. I'm not personally that person, but I know people that are like that and they find it really fun. And I think that that's great. And I think the farther that people get in the field, the easier that is really, because you know the field better, and thinking about how to place your research in that broader context is not as challenging as it is when you start. I've been lucky enough, so I was studying the Coquille and then it invaded a place and people wanted to give me money to study it there. And I was able for the last almost 20 years to keep that going, not at a lot of money, barely enough. And I probably do a lot more with a little money because I don't like just writing grants to write grants. But I was able to keep it going enough to keep students involved. And then more recently, I've gotten 3 NSF grants from the Arctic program where I'm doing research in Alaska, all in the last less than 10 years, and 2 I just kind of more recently got. But I only write grants when I'm super excited about an idea, and I think it can get funded because I believe in it. So I think if you're writing a grant to write a grant, or you feel you need more money, but you're not really believing what you're writing, or then I think it's probably not going to get funded anyway. And so, yeah, I don't know, my perspective on it.
So much to say. So I think that science communication has multiple levels at which we communicate science. In a talk, in a paper, in a proposal where we think of our idea. To me, I actually am one of these people who's become the administrator who's building things to support people that do science at a time when NSF funding rates are at 7 to 8%, 9%. So there are a variety of ways to get funding, and I actually like to go get funding, but in a whole bunch of different ways. But what I was going to say was that the proposal process for me throughout my career has been a really important process that akin to sort of a strategic planning kind of a process where you bring people together and you brainstorm, you think about what you can do, how to do this experiment, how to do that experiment, and you're communicating around the science process and you're putting it into a way that other people across multiple fields have to understand. So it really challenges you to think about how to translate your geekiness around a particular topic that you know the inner depths of, to pull out and say, this is the emergent property. So that exercise is so important. I don't love to write grants because it does take me a friggin' long time to write a grant, but it forces us to think about why it matters. How do we scale it up? How do we test these things? And if you can convince people to do that, and I think the process for the most part works, I think that's good. So a couple things, a slight tangent from your question. As a reviewer, because I hate those sorts of comments that go personal, don't ever comment either a paper or a proposal on a personal aspect of a person or anything like that. Always read a review multiple times and say to yourself, is this offensive in any way? Because I shouldn't take this personal. You got to pick out your person. It's got to be objective. Remember that people have devoted 6 months to writing this proposal. were enormous amounts of time to writing a paper. Don't ever put anything personal in those things. You really pull yourself out of that. Really an important lesson. I just had to comment. Sorry. The other thing is, it's important to be entrepreneurial. I'm not suggesting being the tail that wags the dog. Don't do that. Go after your issue, but think about traditional places to go for money, and think about non-traditional places to go to money. So now I'm totally in the philanthropy world. I've been getting NSF support for a while, LTREB NSF support to support long-term studies, because I do a lot of long-term studies. I couldn't do my work without it. I've also gotten several REU site grants because I feel strongly about supporting research experiences for underrepresented minorities. That wouldn't happen unless I got those site grants. But now I'm in a position where I have access to very wealthy individuals. And so I can go after these people and get large amounts of money to support science or make it accessible to people to do these sorts of things. Each of you, as you move in your career, you will have access to individuals like that. And it's your challenge to think about why what you do matters to that person. And the more you can think about that, and the more you can articulate that in a way that's digestible to others, the more successful you'll be in grant getting, and whatever you do, I guarantee it.
I completely agree with that. And I just want to add one thing. Best piece of advice I was ever given about being a reviewer, whether it's for a paper or for a grant, is don't look at it as all the things you can tear it down for. Think about as if you are a collaborator on that grant and you're just trying to make it better. Because your name's on it and you want it to be the strongest it could be. And so there you give helpful criticism. You're not trying to tear something apart. And I think because of the way we often run our journal clubs and we're all trying to just find the flaws, that we forget that there's people behind this that literally put their heart and soul in it, and they might have missed something. And it's your opportunity to help them identify that and correct it, not to make them feel bad for it.
I've signed every review I've written, and some journals take them off. And the advice really isn't sign your reviews. Write it with your name under it so you don't get ad hominem, and then cut your name off before you submit it. But I actually feel strongly enough about trying to be constructive, even if I'm negative. So like, it's not like I accept everything or recommend acceptance of everything, but I signed every review.
Yeah, I agree with that completely as well. And I try to ask myself when I'm reviewing, especially papers, not what do I not like about this, but what does this study contribute? What can I learn from this study? What's its value? Not can I find the fatal flaw?
Thank you so much insight. So I want to open up the floor for questions, but I have a really pressing and extremely important question. What is your go-to karaoke song? And don't give me any bullshit that you don't go to karaoke, because everyone karaoke's, whether you're in the car, in the shower, or cleaning your house. But this is a very important question to me. Thank you.
I've only done karaoke once. And I don't even remember the name of the song. Like I know some of the lyrics.
Oh, let's hear it.
But I'm not going to sing it. But everybody's going to know it's that song where now like I got myself stuck in this. Okay, come back to me.
I'm big into Shay's Lounge these days. Shay's Lounge, Google it. Mommy, Daddy, look at me. I went to the uni and I got a big degree.
Historically, I have used me and Bobby McGee. And yeah, because I started that, decades ago, and I know the words, and okay, I'm in this position. I got to come up with a song. I keep reusing the same one.
I've actually never sang in a karaoke. I swear to God, I never have. That said, I am into music in a big way. And so I listen to a lot of music and sing to a lot of music. People like Phoebe Bridgers, Dope Lemon. I'm into a lot of different types of music. So I do sing, but not at a karaoke.
My mentee, she's obsessed with Phoebe Bridgers.
Yeah.
She even got a tattoo recently.
I'm
And
not gonna show
so
you my
when
Phoebe
we're in the
Bridgers
field, when we're in the field, I sing just to make sure, because we're on a hiking path too. So I don't like scare people, because they're always like, what you doing in there? And she's always singing Phoebe. So that's funny. Okay.
We're going to come back.
Oh, I think it's Gloria Gaynor. Is that
Oh,
right?
wow.
Does somebody know who do you
Yeah,
know who
she's
I'm
like a disco.
I
Yeah.
will survive.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
There we go.
Wait, give her the mic, give her the
Yeah.
mic.
For me, it's either bad 80s. Like I know every word to every 80s song. Even if I don't think I know it, you put it on and suddenly I can sing every word. Or lately it's been a lot of Beyonce, sometimes some Sia, that kind of stuff.
So questions from the audience. And Peter, can you be my mhm.
She's dirty from walking around.
Got it. I'm coming.
Okay, so I know this applies pretty directly to several of the speakers, and I'm sure others have dealt with similar ethical conundrums maybe, but how do you communicate the importance or merit of an unpopular decision such as invasive species control, even when it might not be publicly popular?
I gave a talk to LA Audubon, and among other, my ecotourism book, and among other things, I said, one of the lessons from this is, don't feed animals, and that means bird feeders, and I never got invited back.
I deal with this a lot. I mean, the cat issue. Just because I feel that in the back of my head, I hear a clock ticking. And as we heard earlier from Dan, cats are responsible for 63 species extinctions that we know about worldwide. And it's continuing. It's just there are another 400 species that they threaten. And so there are issues in Hawaii, for example. It was, hearing the amount of money that goes towards koki management in Hawaii. Cats run wild in Hawaii. I mean, it's just crazy. They kill Hawaiian monk seals through toxo.
And it's getting worse.
And it's getting worse. So I'm trying to figure out a way to sort of, do that in a way that's more popular. I haven't been good at it, I have to admit. But it boils down to killing one species to save another. And in this case, it's a question of killing a cute, cuddly species that's embedded in our culture going back thousands of years. It's cartoon characters. It's, kids are raised with these things. It's a cat, and getting a culture that isn't really a culture and people that understand science or understand conservation, to understand the need to sort of kill a cat to save another species, because that's what it is. It is that harsh line. And we have to remove cats, and TNR does not work. The solutions that are out there just do not work. And so we euthanize things all the time. We euthanize kokis, but we don't see groups saying something about the kokis. We have shows that are going out and killing alligators in the swamps of Louisiana, or killing pythons in Florida, which I totally agree with. And so what I try to do is to provide as much evidence as I possibly can. But I'm not convinced it's working to change the opinions of people on the other side. So yeah, I haven't figured it in that case.
I think that I'm a conflict avoider, particularly where it pertains to people that I care about. My family, I'm terrified of telling them bad news, but for reasons that aren't clear to me, people who I don't know, or people that I work with that I don't especially like, I have no problem at all telling people things they don't want to hear. It seems like a completely different category to me, that I just don't care about telling people unpopular things. That I don't know that that's a particularly good strategy, though.
To Twitter. Really piss a lot of people off.
Was your question, how do we convince people, or what was your, rephrase it again?
Yeah, I guess my question is just, how to convince people, how to potentially think about even changing policy? I know that's like a huge question. That's like why we're all in this field. I think, yeah, just seeing, I guess, polarization on sides of, invasive species and so many other things is so frustrating as someone in science. But how do you start to approach people who have totally different values than you, and maybe not the people, but I guess using your science to reach out to them, if that makes sense? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a really tough question, and I don't know that I have a great answer for it. I don't, I guess and this is maybe bad, but I feel like I've a little bit given up on trying to change one person's mind about something like that. I don't know if through conversation I can do that. So and that's kind of, I guess, what I was talking about a little bit earlier in my talk, but I kind of try to let my science speak for itself, and I hope that people see it. And then they can interpret it too. So think how, like, what I mean by that is, like, I'll go to, or the newspapers come to me and ask me about what I'm studying, and I talk about my results, and then it's put out there, and then people have responses to it, but it's really hard for me to manage those responses, I think. Yeah, so I think through large policy changes is really the only way that we can really maybe change the needle on some things like the cat issue.
Well, I mean, I'm part of a collaboration that wrote a paper called Underestimating the Challenges of Avoiding a Ghastly Future. And, we note that population is one of those. And we talk about consumption as well, population and affluence and, IPAT. But, some people don't like that. And that led to rebuttals and et cetera. We're writing a paper now that we actually haven't written. We're sort of stalled because this is sort of strategies to avoid a ghastly future. And it's all systems thinking, and it's all global, and we list a whole series of things that need to be done, including changing our whole economic system, high in the sky. The thing we're struggling with is, so my colleague Corey Bradshaw has done a bunch of research, and if you think about clean energy infrastructure and biodiversity, and you sort of do and all of these require assumptions, and they're not true everywhere. But if you really sort of do an audit on what's the biodiversity cost in a particular context of building up a solar grid and or a wind grid versus nuclear, clean nuclear, actually is better in many cases. And reading his stuff, and he gets attacked and called a nuclear shill, which I don't think he is, and the people he did this work with, I don't think are either. But there's better nuclear, there's worse nuclear, but if you need to decarbonize fast, that's technology that we have, and we're not using it at our own peril. And we have this huge fight going on right now among the authors that we've sort of stopped and paused, and we have to address soon, dealing with this so we can get this paper submitted. Of all the things, we end with, and if, so this is quite timely because I'm actually quite depressed because I think we're closer to annihilating ourselves with a nuclear war than we have been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And, we wrote this a while ago, and, before Ukraine was a thing, I mean, Ukraine's been a thing since 2014, but before Ukraine was a hot thing, and the last thing we say is, Dave Barish wrote that section, that we need to, denuclearify our weapons and get rid of those because we can do everything else right, and then it's game over if you have a nuclear war. So it's frustrating that people clearly don't like to hear. I mean, the population stuff's bad enough, but also the nuclear power debate about what is an energy future. Energy future is decarbonizing as fast as possible wherever you can, and then you do other things. But anyway, I don't know. We're not successful at convincing other people of this yet.
Just to add one thing, there's an interesting area of work that's starting to emerge called theory of change, and how this emerges and what the levers are, and thinking about levers. I don't know if the last 2 years, it's like the most commonly used word. It's because it's an important word. But really trying to drill down and understand where the levers are for particular change issues, whether it's understanding the social science behind something or the hard science behind something. So I'm optimistic that there's something there that I'm looking to sort of really dive into a lot more. So when I approach these issues, I'm actually going to look into those sorts of areas a bit more to try to figure out what is the lever that I should be focusing on. So for me, it's pulling back into my science this time, the theory.
But the beauty of humanity is we're diverse. And that diversity means that when you come up with a change model, you can have things you're doing that addresses one subpopulation or one personality type and makes irate another subpopulation. And to me, that's the foundational challenge. I mean, if we can't get COVID right in the US, forget the rest of the world. If we can't get COVID right in the US, I mean, or the rest of the world, how are we going to solve these bigger problems? COVID's an easy problem.
Yeah, I know. I kind of thought the same thing.
You know, but
Yeah,
you know, you say
I know.
wear masks, and this has polarized our country.
How
But
far are we
so-
from happy hour?
So on a more positive note, there's all kinds of cultural shifts that are happening in our society right now that have always happened, right? And so I look to those for inspiration. Like, 100 years ago, we would not have thought we would legalize gay marriage, for example. I mean, but you can think of good cultural shifts that have happened as eyes have opened, things that like we never would have thought
10 or 20 years
would have
ago.
been acceptable, right?
Yeah.
So, cultural change can happen. And, how that happens, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an expert in that area, but I know that it can, and I know there's people that are figuring out how it can. And so I think for a lot of these really big issues, there will be cultural change. It just might take time to get there.
I say win or lose, we booze at Carney's. So everyone, thank you so much for this little peek into y'all. And everyone is invited to Carney's. Thank you, Griffin. Yeah, there's food and drinks there. So thank you everyone for a very successful and scientific day.